We were in the attic. It was still fairly decently warm, and we had night watches, and we were afraid of any noise of anybody coming in. And the house was an old abandoned house which was not being used, covered with thatch roof. And I would stand there at the roof and smell the fresh air, freshly mown hay, and listen to the cicadas and frogs and birds. And this was another world. This was not for me. This was something that was forbidden. And as it got colder, we were brought down to the pantry where there was a bread oven. Now, we were given food. Food came from the main house. It was a big farm. And the food was brought in every morning. So for breakfast, we had milk and eggs and bread. For dinner, we had soup usually, vegetables, whatever there was, piece of meat occasionally. We were never hungry. Bathing, water was brought for bathing. Now we're 2 women and 3 men. And whatever we had, a basin of water and soap. Soap was homemade because you couldn't buy soap. And whatever was left from the bathing in its basin, we used for washing our clothes. And it came to a point where they would bring the family clothes to the chamber there to be washed, and I was the main washerwoman with a washboard. Then things got worn out, so I had a sheet. So I made a dress for Mrs. Lederman, and I made one dress for me, and I made my own bra. I mean, you had to replenish your clothes, and you couldn't go to the store and buy it. We had books. We had literature. We were studying. Sam was a great science student, so he was teaching us, and we were fighting over the book. And among other things that we did, listening to news.
This is London. London calling in the...
We had news through the underground from the BBC in London. We had a newspaper, local newspapers, which were issued in Polish language, but they were fed by the German sources. So between the 2 of them, we could figure things out. We also had a map with little pins, colored pins, and we knew about the progress of the Allied forces and about the Soviet forces. And it was sad to say, but the Soviets were moving and the Allies were not. Because after 1942, when Stalingrad fell, we had a feeling that this would be the turning point of the war, and sure it was. And we waited for the second front, and we waited for this, and we waited for that. And that's how we're passing at our time, waiting. In the meantime, we had 3 close encounters. The Germans were there looking for Jews, and they came with dogs, but we had built a very clever bunker in the meantime. The entrance was covered with soil, and on top of it, they put rabbits. Rabbits smell, and they fool the dogs, and that saved our lives too. Time was passing, and it was already 1944, and we heard rumble of the ground, especially we were in the underground bunker, cannon. The front was coming closer to us, the Russians were coming closer to us. And one morning, on the 3rd of August 1944, we heard voices outside. They were not Polish, they were not German, they were Russians. We cannot leave openly because it's a shame to save Jews. What would the neighbors say, that the Tsar saved 5 human beings? It's not good. Madame Zalewska spoke Russian. She and Ezil, who had long, strong legs, ran over to the big house, and they tried to explain the situation. And they found an officer. He happened to have been a Jewish guy who didn't speak Yiddish. And he got the story, he got the gist of the story. And he came back to our house, to the second house, and he said, "Show me what happened." And here are 5 bedraggled people, pale because we haven't seen the sun. We haven't been outdoors in 2 years almost. And we told him the story, and he realized that we are not safe in this house. And at night, he sent an adjutant with a horse and a buggy. In the meantime, he left somebody at the door and took us to a house that he requisitioned before. And they brought us a goose, and Mother cooked it. It was the first meal cooked as free people. And the Zhars came over as guests. And Russians lost 20 million people. So they were so kind to us. They had very little, but whatever little they had, they shared. So they put us on a truck and they made us go east. And because Lublin by then was already the provisional capital of the Polish government under the Russian aegis, with a government seat and more or less normal life. We waited there for a few months, and when the front broke and Warsaw was liberated and Lodz was liberated, we went there. I was in my hometown. Went to our apartment. I was walking in the street slowly, and I met survivors. On the 3rd of August, 1945, my father showed up. He was liberated from Buchenwald by the American army, and he looked great. He was fine. He died at 87, my arms in Israel, many years later. And we finally got to the American zone in Munich, and we landed in a DP camp. Schools were open, universities were open. Isaac went to medical school, Sam went to Polytechnic Institute, and I worked for American Joint Distribution Committee, and I worked in 3 languages. I was a secretary to the supply officer for American Zone, and we distributed food, clothing to DP camps. And I supported the house. I had a PX card, I had an American uniform, I spoke English, and I could buy cigarettes, and my mother-in-law would sell them on the black market, and we could buy food for it. I got married June 11th, 1946, and my baby was born August 1948. We finally came to the United States on July 21st, 1949, and we landed in Brooklyn. And a new life began. And we had 4 children. And when I look at immigration, when I look at my family alone, what we contributed to this country, I would say that my religion was raising or rearing children as honest, good people, caring for others, and not thinking of themselves too much. And until we stop teaching children to hate, whatever happens will never stop. I'm optimistic because my optimism kept me alive, and my optimism made me live and keep on living and hoping for the best, because we all try the best, because we all try to make a future for our children. So we have to work on it. When I talk to children in schools, which I do quite frequently, I usually end with saying to them, you have people running around loose all over the place denying that the Holocaust ever happened. You just tell them, it's not true, it happened. It happened. I met a person who was there and was telling me, was showing me. It truly happened.